Good evening, everyone. I am a grateful, thankful believer in Jesus Christ who has delivered me from outbursts of anger, shame, abandonment issues, infidelity, insecurity, self-doubt, low self-esteem, low self-worth, addiction to nicotine, and the cusp of alcoholism. I am currently working on an unhealthy relationship with food, codependency, and the anxiety and control issues that come along with it, and my name is Nichole.
My name is Joe. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, recovering from drugs, alcohol, and a whole list of other stuff.
I was born June 10th, 1983, and I was raised in a broken home by my dad until I was 12 and decided to live with my mom. I was raised in the church until I was preschool age, but it didn't last long. And then I only went to church when my mom had boyfriends that wanted to go, which was not very often. But I knew that God was real from as far back as I can remember. I inherently knew even then that Jesus was real, but I had no idea what that meant for my life. My teenage years were spent pretending that I was someone that I wasn't to fit in and trying to fill a void with boys that only God himself could fill. I cried out so often praying that God would change me, but I didn't realize until years later that when I asked him to change me, I needed to surrender fully. I got married at 17 to a man 7 years older than me, and while marriage started off well, I soon learned that although my husband claimed to be a Christian, he didn't live out the little bit I had learned was part of being a Christian. Our marriage was built on unrealistic expectations, codependency, stuffed emotions, and eventually lies. We had 3 children, and I miscarried 3 children. All of those pregnancies led to varying degrees of postpartum depression that went untreated. I became mean, resentful, and hateful, and eventually had a short-lived affair. I didn't necessarily want to get a divorce, but between the depression and my husband working out of town more and more frequently as the years went on, a distance continued to grow between us that we were too stubborn and selfish to try to remove. After 14 years of marriage, we separated. Instead of continuing to go to church and seek the only one that could heal me and change me, I chose the road of alcohol, bars, and men. Eventually, though, that still small voice broke through the barriers I had placed, and I returned to church, to God, and began searching for a better way. After 3 years of worldly living, I started the process of forgiveness. I was finally becoming content with being single and on my own with my children, and I felt God calling me to begin praying for my future husband.
Yeah, our stories are definitely quite different. She sensed God from an early presence or early age. I didn't at all. I grew up in a very dysfunctional, abusive household. I remember being a kid thinking, like, I'm not loved here, constantly in fear of being physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, things of that nature. And I say that because that shaped who I was as a kid. And I remember growing up with this huge, like, and one time in particular that I won't go into, but when I walked away from this time, I thought, like, man, I really am alone. Like, I got nobody. When I got to grade school, man, I just wanted to be accepted. I just wanted people to like me. And, I'd cut up and act like a class clown, and people would laugh, and I thought that they liked me. Well, the friends that I thought liked me, well, they started smoking pot. And, man, I wanted that. Like, it's not necessarily the drug that I wanted to be involved. I wanted to be doing what they were doing. So I started smoking weed at 13. That progressed. By the time I was 16, cocaine, 17, methamphetamine, it kept going on. And, I may have started drugs because I wanted to be accepted, I wanted to be loved, I wanted to be part of a group. But there along the way in my teenage years, I chose that's what I wanted. Like, I wasn't trying to get away from it. There wasn't a point where it's like, no, this is too much for me. As a matter of fact, when people would tell me, Joe, you are doing too much, I would really get them out of my life. I wanted that. I wanted to do that. And I embraced being bad. I embraced being rebellious. I embraced being talked about, even if it was negative. This led to a very severe drug addiction. Even intravenously, I started using intravenously methamphetamine. Ended up very depressed. I had a daughter with my first marriage, and in some sense, she kept me alive in some instances. Delina has a very powerful testimony about when she attempted to commit suicide, and the thought of people seeing that. The same thing happened to me. I tried to commit suicide one night. The thought of my daughter finding my dead body just stopped me from doing it. Like, I couldn't put that on her. But I ended up in a very, very dark spot, depressed for years, and I was an atheist. I didn't want anything to do with God. I thought God was foolish. I thought anything that was divine was silly, was stupid. Anybody that was a Christian, they're just a bunch of fairy tales, and that's just kind of how I believed. Well, I had nothing to reach out for. As an atheist, it's all within you. Either you can do it or you can't. And I ended up in a very dark, desperate, depleted spot that I didn't know how to get out of. One night God spoke to me. I was at the end of my rope. And I want to share this real quick. When God spoke to me, the thing that was the most powerful wasn't that God spoke to me, was that I was his enemy and he spoke to me. You know, I wasn't somebody who was doing good or trying to do good and trying to get my life right. I was somebody at the bottom of my rope, and I contemplated suicide for a while, and I think I was really working up the nerve to actually do it. And God spoke to me one night, and it changed my life. And it wasn't too far after that, I got, through many circumstances, went to a residential place called Interfaith Disciple House, which is kind of what we're going to be opening in Tennessee. Well, it's called Interfaith, it's the same thing. And when I went there, I was trepidatious. I didn't know who God was. I just knew he was real now. And that's all the faith that I needed for God to open up my heart toward him. And that little Joe that had nobody love him, I got to turn that over to God throughout the process. And I was never giving that over to a God that would ever turn me away or ever reject me. I was giving it over to a faithful God that will never leave me and never forsake me. And you know, there's plenty, especially Christian atmosphere, people can say, Jesus loves you. And I mean, I get it, but it's different when he tells you that. And so going through that program, I started to believe, and this took me a long time, that God really did love me. He wasn't just sitting there going, you know, I gotta do this for Joe. He stresses me out. No, he really loves me. And when my eyes opened up to that, and my heart opened up to that, I wanted the sober life. I wanted the life that God had for me. When I graduated that program, I knew there was things that I wanted. I wanted a life. I wanted to share it with somebody. I wanted to be married. I just didn't know how that would come about. So I started praying for my wife also.
I began praying for someone who loves God wholeheartedly. Someone who would love my children as his own and would be a good role model for them. Someone that would help me to raise them to love God. Someone that would guide me to Jesus every single day. I didn't realize then that I would meet that man about 6 months after I first started praying for him when I walked into Interfaith Disciple House for a Crawfish Bowl fundraiser.
Yeah, I wasn't so thorough in my prayers. I just wanted a woman who loved Jesus and didn't smoke cigarettes. That's all you know, I didn't want to kiss an ashtray, so that's what I was really working on. But I do remember the night that I started praying for a wife. Man, the Lord told me 7 years. And look, man, I'm immediate gratification. I want it now. And I remember when I'm praying, the Lord told me 7 years, and I thought, no, I'm not waiting. And then immediately after, I had a play reel of all my previous relationships, the dumpster fire of my love life up to that point. And I realized that my picker is broken. Like, I know I picked the person who's, I'm not going to say that here. I picked the person who's not all there and is crazy that can hide it for the first 30 days. That's the person that I picked. That's the person I'm drawn to. And when I started thinking about my relationships, I thought, man, this is doomed. If I don't let God do this, this is doomed. And so that night I told God, I will put my hand to the plow, and I won't look left and I won't look right. You just let me know when she's here. And the fundraiser is when I saw her. And I got to tell you this, that when this is the weird part, because when Nichole walked in, she was glowing, and I knew that she was going to be my wife. And I had already had in my mind, we got past all the introductions and stuff, and like, this is my wife, we're going to get married. You can't walk up to somebody and say that. Like, they do stalking charges for that. So I had to play it cool.
So the first day that he reached out to me after 6 weeks of blatantly ignoring me.
Playing it cool.
He sent me a message on Facebook telling me that he liked my Facebook posts, that they were encouraging and inspiring, and that he would love to talk about. Well, I thanked him for the kind message and kind of left it at that and said thanks. I blew him off. You know, he was the first time I'd really seen him, like, he was preaching at Interfaith, and I'm like, there is no way I'm going to marry a preacher man. There's no way I want to think about it. No, just no. And I felt unworthy to be with someone that was in that position. There was a preacher that had God just poured on top of him. So I still carried some of that shame from my previous marriage, but God.
Yeah.
All that night, I felt God nudging me to message him back. And I was like, no, it's not gonna happen. But he kept on. Of course, you know, he's faithful in everything, right? So he was faithfully nudging me all night long. I was finally to the point where I was content being single, even though I was praying for my future husband. I was content. Like, I had a business, I had my kids, I had a list. I wanted to buy a house, I wanted to get a dog, I wanted to do all these things. I got a dog. That was my one check mark. But I gave in, and next morning I sent him a message, and I apologized for being rude and blowing him off, and told him that I would love to talk to him as well.
Yeah, I totally noticed you blew me off. And I worked up some nerves with that. I know how smooth it is. I like your Facebook post. I mean, come on. So. But I started toiling around in my head. I woke up the next morning. I was on vacation in Freeport. We were in a beach house, and I woke up the next morning. You know, you're about near the water. You want to get your cup of coffee. You want to go on the porch. And I was sitting there reading the text message again. And I'm sitting there like, I was in the same position Nichole was. Like, life was okay. Like, I prayed for a wife, but man, I was doing good in school, had a nice place to live, my daughter was functioning well, and listen, relationships are hard, they're hard work. And it's like when you're committed to marrying somebody or committed to getting into a relationship, it shakes things up. And I second thought it for a little while. And so I sat there on the porch and I'm looking at this message, and I thought to myself, like, do I even want to go down this road? And I went, no, I don't want any of this. And I just threw it on the ottoman in front of me, and I'm not even joking. As soon as it hit the ottoman, it went ding, and it was her messaging me. At that exact moment, it was her sending me a message that next day.
So we met up the following week for coffee, and during our 3-hour coffee date, I figured, you know what? If we're going to entertain the idea of getting to know each other, I'm just going to lay it all out. And I mean lay it all out. Like, he got the whole full version of everything that I had ever done wrong, from an affair to literally everything, pretty much lied to everything. And I figured, you know what? If he doesn't run away screaming and be like, this chick is crazy, no, then maybe it's worth it. So he didn't.
Yeah, I embrace the chaos. When I hear that, it's like she's being honest. I've been in recovery for years, and one of the things that I've learned is honesty is everything. And so when somebody's sitting in front of me and they're pouring their heart out, I don't have this like, ooh, like there's no disgust meter there. It's like, I appreciate you being honest with me, and I was very, very thankful for that. I remember Nichole. I hope you don't mind me saying this. I remember Nichole fighting through some insecurities because we talked every night. We were like little birds or whatever. And I remember Nichole saying, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to be with me? My life is chaotic. I got these kids. And I'm like, you have no idea how I view you. Look, if I viewed you the way that you viewed yourself, you have no idea. Like, I view you as this is what God has in front of me. And when I said, okay, I'm ready for it. Like, I understand it's not this big bow where everything's nice. I'm not inundated by a bunch of Hallmark movies where people float on air and they, you know what I mean? I understand life is life, and so we had to fight through some of that, but ultimately we did come together on that.
So we got engaged in we met in April of 2018. We were engaged in September. We eloped in November, and we had our actual wedding in January. We blended our families. His daughter Skylar was 17, his son Jacob was 16, Aspen was 15, Abby was 12, and Dakota was 9. And life was not sunshine and roses. I still had so many things that I was dealing with internally, and I could switch between stuffing all of my emotions and blowing up over them. We argued over how to parent the kids, who did what chores, when we had sex, who was supposed to initiate it. We even argued over how to load the dishwasher. So we literally, if we could argue about it, we argued about it. The kids were growing up, and we had one off to college, we had another one about to graduate, and one that didn't want to come around anymore. But after 3.5 years of marriage, we were struggling really bad, to the point where it was either we had to fix it or that was going to be the end. We were going to get a divorce. We struggled, with the blendings of the families, and I was struggling with communicating my needs. I still had the unrealistic expectations of Joseph and of my children, and I was angry. Like, I still had anger that I was dealing with, and I didn't know how to handle it at all, towards my kids, towards him, towards my parents, everything.
Yeah, we definitely have a couple of different views here. I understand it was chaotic, but when I counsel couples, a lot of the time is the husband saying, I don't know why I'm here, things were okay. And the wife going, things have not been okay for a while. And look, that's been a big fear of mine. And I could say that happened in our marriage for lack of communication. I went to work and I came home and I kissed my wife, and in my simple mind, everything was all right. Like, I know it wasn't perfect, but we were all right. But we weren't all right. And, a lot of times, Nichole knew how to live on her own. She excelled greatly at it. I mean, she started her own business. She was taking care of her kids. She was active in the church. She knew how to live on her own. And I knew how to live on my own. We just hadn't figured out how to live with each other. And, when I was very naive about my past when we came into our relationship, because, I had been living for God and doing the right thing and everything's going to be all right. And I was naive to the fact that, no, when I got with Nichole, all these insecurities from my past would come up, and they'd come to the surface. And today I can look at that and know that that's God giving me an opportunity to put those mixed feelings and that insecurity where it belongs. But at the time, I didn't know what to do with those things. I had no idea. I found myself getting jealous sometimes over stupid stuff. I found myself not trusting Nichole, and I would have to talk to myself. I would literally have conversations and go, what are you doing, Joe? This woman has not even given you one iota of a reason to ever mistrust her. She's never lied to you. She's confessed when it's hurt her sometimes. Like, why am I thinking this way? And I had to address a lot of my negative thinking, a lot of my very paranoid thinking also. And we just, at the end of the day, we just didn't know how to communicate in those years. And I remember sometimes where I would say, Nichole, we fight, but we don't know how to fight. And, we knew how we fought, but we didn't know how to fight together. And that's part of the journey. One of the things that, I don't know if we're there yet, but I'm going to say it anyway. One of the things that would frustrate me is that when I had gone through my steps with my sponsor, the most powerful thing that I took away from the fourth step was that last little section that says my heart. I learned a lot from that last little section. Because when I did my steps, it was my stepdad did this, and if this wouldn't have happened, this wouldn't have happened, my grandparents, it was all blame. And I had an amazing sponsor. And when I walked with my sponsor, he said, okay, but what part did you play? And so when I did my steps, I took away from there this attitude of looking at my part. I'm not perfect in it, I assure you. But when me and Nichole would argue, we'd come back together and I'd say, look, I'm sorry, I did this, I shouldn't have done that, I should have handled it better. And in my mind, I'm ready for, you're right, Joe, I'm sorry, I did this. But what I was met with was, you should be. And I was like, wait a minute, this isn't how this goes. Like, I'm pouring my heart out here and I'm getting nothing in return. And it was very big frustration. And like I said, it was us not knowing how to communicate. It was us not knowing how to look at our part. One of the hardest things in a relationship is, man, I want to control that other person. I want to change them and I want to control them. Good luck with that. Right? And so we struggled a lot with that. Yeah.
So I knew something that needed to change. I just wasn't sure how to change it, right? Like, I'd given my life over to God. I was doing what he told me to do, but there was still all those things from the past that I couldn't let go of. I didn't know how to let go of them. So Joe finally started urging me to go to Celebrate Recovery. And I'm like, I don't need recovery. You need recovery. You're the addict. I'm not. This is just how I am. That's what I heard all my life growing up. This is how I am. Deal with it. But I finally agreed as long as he would go with me. So I had no idea what CR was. I didn't know how it worked. But I was willing to try. At this point, I was literally willing to try anything. And I knew that God had called me to marry this man, but I also knew that we could not keep going the way that we were. So I gave it a try. We tried a couple of different Celebrate Recovery groups, and one of them, we started going to quite a bit, but then Joe got a call from Delina inviting us to this one because they were just opening. And so we started coming on Saturday, we started attending, and eventually this became our home group. And then I reached out and asked Delina if she would be my sponsor. And when I first felt God telling me to ask her to be my sponsor, I was like, but she's in alcoholism. Like, what? Well, I don't struggle with that. How is this going to work, But God, he knew exactly what he was doing. I began working the steps, and although I still struggled with all of my mess, she and God were slowly helping me see all of it for what it was and to surrender it so that I could become the wife that Joe needed me to be instead of trying to change him into the husband that I needed him to be. I learned that my focus needed to be on my own stuff and not on his. My recovery is my recovery, and his recovery is his recovery if he chooses to do it. I couldn't force him, and I couldn't fix him.
Yeah, there's a couple things that I learned through that. One is that, well, you know, as bad as it sounds, there is a couple things that we did have boundaries for. Very early on, we would mention the word divorce, and we stopped that immediately. We said, look, if both of us have had a failed marriage before, we don't want that to be this. And if that's going to happen, we're not going to speak those words. You can get mad, and I can get mad. We're allowed to get mad, but we need to control the way that we speak to each other in that manner. So we decided that early on. I know that I know God has sent this woman in my life. And I got to say that is probably one of the foundational points that has brought us back together. And look, I could tell you probably one of the worst arguments we got into. I don't even know what the argument was about. It doesn't even matter. But I left for the night. I went and got a hotel room. And my mind was just so filled with, I don't need this. I don't need this. Life was good without this. This is just too much for me. All the stuff repetitiously, right? Trying to get a good night's sleep, but that's what I just kept thinking. And then this is why anybody who's married, and I truly believe this, I don't know how you do it without God in your life. I just don't, man. I really don't. Maybe you're just a better person than me, and I'm okay with that. But I know that after I got through my little aggravation, the Lord started working on me. And it wasn't about Nichole, it was about me. What are you doing? Why aren't you initiating? Why aren't you taking? There was a time where we were very silent toward each other for a couple of days. And it's one of those, well, she's not talking to me, so I'm just not going to talk to her. We're just not going to talk to each other. And that went on for a couple of days. And look, that tore me up inside, tore her up inside too. And we're in the truck, and I just, out of nowhere, I said, look, are we going to do this, or are you going to talk to me? And as soon as I said that, she immediately started crying. And my lesson in that is, why am I waiting for her? Like, this needs a leader, and why am I waiting for her? I need to initiate this. If I'm the leader, if I'm the husband, then I don't wait for her to come to me. I come to her. I need to learn to reconcile this. And that's a very big lesson that I had to learn, that I didn't learn. I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have that model to me growing up. But God is so faithful to teach both of us in those areas. And like I said, if it wasn't for the Lord, you know, her loving Jesus more than she loves me has saved our marriage. And me loving Jesus more than I love her has saved our marriage. Make no mistake. Because when we've had moments where we can't stand each other, we'll get away and we'll lean into the Lord. And the Lord's very faithful, right? If you seek me wholeheartedly, you will find me. I will be known by my people. And so when we sought the Lord, He would reprove us and we'd come back together. And you know, I came back from the hotel room and we were met on the porch with literally like, look, this is what I've done and this is what I've done. And I'm sorry, and I'm sorry. And it was nothing more than God turning our hearts back toward each other. And that reminds me, another boundary that we had was and please hear me, I'll just say what we had. We're not going to have friends that are going to tell us or condemn the other person. We're not going to have friends that say, you don't need him. Don't worry about him. He's just being a jerk face. And I'm not going to have friends that go, oh, look at her, man. You don't need her. We were going to have friends that pushes us back toward each other. Yeah, man, I'll let you vent, but that's your wife. You need to learn to be the husband that you're supposed to be. And we've been very conscious of that too, to not have, look, okay, I'll slow down. In this culture that's so common, you don't need him. He ain't gonna talk to me like that. You don't need him. Oh, bro, you're better off without her. Dude, there's all kinds of women out there. We got a culture of people that will say that to you if you don't guard your heart and guard your ears. And in the moments of our weakness where we can't see the love in the other person, we have to guard against that. Our marriage is a representation of God's faithfulness to us. And God has never left us. He's never forsaken us, and we need to not do that to each other. I'm done, yeah.
2.5 years after starting my road to recovery, there are still bumps along the journey. I can now love my husband.
I don't cause them now. I'm just trying to say.
Okay.
That's a pity road.
I can now love my husband in a way that I could not before. how God says that I should and how Joseph needs me to. I may not do it perfectly, and I may not even do it the right way the majority of the time, but it's progress over perfection. And I'm choosing to live and love him one day at a time to the best of my ability, with God's guiding hand leading me each and every step of the way.
I have grown so much as a person due to my wife. I learned so much being in a relationship with her about myself, about how I manage stress, about how I manage my own household, what it is to be a sacrificial lover, or be faithful even when I don't feel like it. Like those are things that I've learned from being in a relationship with Nichole that God has taught me along the way. And I gotta say, Celebrate Recovery has been so pivotal in our relationship toward each other. And having once again, the focus of what's my part, what can I do to make this better? And one of the things that we was willing, neither one of us wanted for this thing to dissolve. And so, yeah. Now, where are we going in the future? So, yeah, so as we've said a couple of times, we're going to Tennessee. We're going to go create the same house that I went to when I was broken and desperate and wanted to take my own life. And we are going to Tennessee to develop a community and open that up because we want to give other people the same opportunity that I was given. And it's not just about the men, please hear me, it's about the families too. We don't know where the Lord's going to take us in our ministry. We got the residential part pretty much locked up. That's what we're going to do. But who knows where it goes from there? You know, it could be Celebrate Recovery. It could be a women's ministry. It could be for the wives or the mothers of these men. It could be all different kinds of things. The mission isn't just to get men better. It's to restore husbands. It's to restore fathers. It's for Jesus to have his way with a surrendered heart. And so that's where we're headed. That's what our future is. And we're very thankful for God in our life, and y'all as a community, of course. So that's it.
Thank you.